Thanks everyone today for joining me for the Eliminate the Unknown webinar with our two panelists here. So today we're going to talk about if you don't know if you're buying a liability or an asset, this webinar will stress the importance of understanding what you're getting when looking to acquire or invest in a new company. Our two panelists here today will discuss four main focus points to address when undergoing an M&A initiative. First one being data usability. What's being sold, is it fit for purpose, and is it easily usable? Second, how much work will be involved in integrating a data set into your organization? Third, the compliance piece. Is the data that you're buying compliant with policies and regulations that your company must follow? And finally, the monetary value of the data and how this is determined. Our panelists, and they're going to dive into this, but strongly recommend when doing due diligence on a company before buying it, don't forget one of the most important assets, the data. So Julia, with that being said, I'll hand it over to you for an introduction of yourself.
Thank you, Ellie. So I'm Julia Bartmesser. I'm CEO of Data for Real. I just started this company. I have overall over 25 years of experience in financial services, leading data technology and business transformations around data governance, digital transformation. So lots of experience in that area. Also a lot of experience in M&A. And that focus on data capabilities during M&A or investing into the companies came from that experience, because I have seen both things going really badly during integration. I have seen price being done incorrectly because what you thought you were buying just wasn't there. And so that came out, that whole topic came out of all of that experience.
Thanks, Julia. And Mark, over to you.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Mark Rowan. I'm a co-founder of Data Sentinel and the CEO of the business. My experience extends over 25 years being in the data management space in general terms, with the vast majority of that time being focused on helping large-scale organizations with all things related to data management, with a deep focus and specialization in data governance. And with Data Sentinel, what we're doing with sensitive data management. The company itself and what we do with Data Sentinel, it's a technology business where we're bringing to the marketplace the ability to be able to leverage Data Sentinel to help automate a lot of the processes relative to what we're going to talk about today through our mergers and acquisitions discussion. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Mark. Okay, let's dive into things here. So first question I have for you both is, as we dive deeper into the seriousness of understanding what you're buying and what you're investing in, let's start with data literacy. So, and Julia, maybe I can point this question at you to start us, but what is data literacy? Why is it important? And how can organizations get a better handle on it?
So data literacy, and there are multiple definitions of that, and it's still an evolving field, but generally the definition for data literacy is its ability to understand, use, and make decisions based on data. I extended a little bit. That definition is also understanding how data capabilities, not just data, but data capabilities allow you to achieve your business goals. So tying things, for example, the realization of the value from M&A, if we're going back to the topic of this discussion, to the data capabilities of your own company and the company you're buying. So it's data in and of itself, and also making data usable, which is what data capabilities are. And that understanding of how all of that fits together and how it's used to promote the goals of your company, that's data literacy.
Okay, interesting. I think this is going to feed really nicely into my next question, which Mark, I'll lean on you for. So as it relates to data usability and determining is what's being sold correct, complete, fit for purpose, and easily usable, is there a way that one can determine all this?
That's a great question as well. When you think about, and I'll try to tie it back into, Julia, what you were just talking about as well. When you think about the state of data and data completeness, data quality, is the data usable for purpose, etc. Use case by use case, the answer is going to be a little bit different. So an organization that might be being acquired was using the data for a purpose that might be somewhat different than what it will be used for in the new organization, as an example. So use case is extremely important when you begin to talk about the usability associated with data. when we talk about that, how we determine the usability of it, we use technology in our case to help automate the processes of discovering and measuring the quality or the usability of data measured against those use cases that are defined by the customer and or the acquiring organization, as an example. So with that knowledge in hand, we investigate data using the tech that we've brought into the marketplace, and we look at anomalies within the data. We look at areas of the data that completeness is a significant issue, especially in an M&A situation where you have an expectation of a set of data being complete. But once you start to sit down and go through the planning of integration of that data or those data sources into your organization, you find that there's a lot of gaps and there's a lot of challenges relative to that data. So what we want to try to do is automate the processes of evaluating the data, understanding the correctness, the usability, and the fit for and the relative fit for purpose based on those use cases, and then talk about remediation strategies and how and when to remediate that data in preparation for that eventual downstream consumption and integration.
Absolutely,
So-
Mark. Oh,
No,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to jump in a little bit on that.
Please.
And to add to that, so again, that's automation and tooling that lets you answer the question. If you're buying a company and you're buying company, let's say for the customer, for the market share that they bring to you, is there actually data about those those customers? Is it there? Is it complete? What's the quality of this data? For example, we have some really high profile failures around, JP Morgan bought a company and it turned out they made up their CRM data. Right? They haven't looked.
Wow.
Right? They thought they were buying a company, and I think it's a well-known case. It's been in the papers and all of that, and they thought they were buying a company with a really large customer footprint, and it turns out that the data was made up. I bet you they haven't looked very carefully. So avoiding, and that's just, high profile, JP Morgan spending a lot of money. There is a lawsuit that is so that's very well known. And we all know from our own experience when we go and we say, well, we want to have customer data and we want to understand the customers of this company. And it turns out the information about the customers of this company are in the C drive of one of the main salespeople, and he never bothered to put it into Salesforce or CRM tool. So to all intents and purposes, you don't have that data. So they may have the customers. It may not be the fraud type of situation. They may have the customers, just you don't have the information of these customers once you buy the company. So again, this is something that you need to look at, and you need to have tooling because you can't really eyeball.
Right. Especially if there's large volume.
Yeah,
And there's
exactly.
complexity associated with it as well. And you've reminded me of a particular situation where one of our clients, who was a large US-based healthcare insurer, was doing a number of acquisitions, and they were doing some sequentially. They were happening one after another after another. Back in those days, we were one of their data management partners, data consultancy, and we were helping them with this overall integration. What shocked me, and I think shocked the leadership of the business, was how long it took to clean up, remediate, and integrate the data for every single one of those applications, or integrations, I should say, to the point where they were questioning the value of the acquisition because it took well over 2 years to consume the data. And if you can't get the data into your systems, you're in effect not benefiting from that acquisition for a long period of time.
Exactly, Mark. That's exactly. So I have seen that as well, which is why a lot of my passion comes around that. And it's actually one of the services I offer through Data for Real, is that evaluation of data capabilities, because inorganic growth, the idea is that you accelerate your growth, right? That you get to your objectives faster because you just bought it. and that's what you pay for, and that's how you try to determine the price. And then, once you buy it and you never looked, is data there? Is it accessible? Can you get it out? Is it of high quality? Can you integrate it? How it's going to fit within your systems? You didn't look at it, and all of a sudden your time to value is 2, 3, 5 years. I have seen it 5 years as well.
Yes. So especially
Yeah,
on data quality initiatives that seem to go on forever. Yes.
Forever. And then your value that you were buying just in time to get somewhere because that's your roadmap, what did you pay for? And I'm not even touching all the risk, right? All the privacy risk. Are you buying a lawsuit? I think, but that's just, your what are you paying for, and when you're going to realize it? And shouldn't you know this before the fact, before you pay?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I hear you both touching on the data quality piece. So I'm going to dive in here and throw this to either of you, but can you speak to what is raw data? I think it ties in with the quality there, and what are the costs associated with it? Julia, I know you gave that one example where it's $11 million suit that they're invested in right now. But also, how much are you buying that's duplicated within the system that you already have? Are you buying redundant data and things like that? So can one of you touch on that a little bit?
Happy to start, Julia, if I may.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So when you think about the concept associated with what is raw data, again, every organization is going to view that a little bit differently. Duplication is one element of it, but the other piece of the puzzle is, what are the critical data elements that I need to operate the business that are absolutely crucial, that have to be accurate, and they have to be complete, and they have to be singular in nature. They can't be duplicated. So they've got to be a perfect set of data. But the other element of that that's really interesting is you want to minimize your data footprint as part of this process, and to tie it back into sensitive data management and privacy compliance as an example. And that means ultimately only consuming the data that is absolutely necessary for you to meet your requirements of use and monetization of that data downstream, which means potentially looking at the age of information, or is it out of date relative to your policies and how you manage and govern data within your organization. So there's the quality pillar for sure, the right data with the right content to be consumed. And then you've got the duplicate piece of that puzzle. You only need one set of it, and then you want to use that and consume that appropriately for downstream systems. So getting rid of those duplicates is part of what a core technology can do. But then again, you've got aging. And what is redundant information that is really just clogging your systems, creating a broader risk footprint across the organization. And then obviously best practices are to minimize that to the greatest degree possible. And again, we can use technology to identify what is a critical data element, what is the quality of that, what are the duplicates associated with that, and what is the age of that information, and is it relevant to your business today, and what should be archived and moved off your systems.
All of that is really important to understand. And again, it behooves you to understand it before you buy the company or you invest in the company, because it affects your bottom line and the amount of value you get from the acquisition. There is another piece of it. It's a people piece, right? We started with data literacy. So you're buying a company, and let's say it's not duplicate data, it's new data, and it's a new business line, a new product that you're buying. Are there people, or is there documentation? Or is there data cataloging? Is there data governance practice? Can you understand what the data is? Because again, you can have tooling and everything looking at data duplicates, but sometimes you need to know if it's I don't know, if it's a balance. Is it a balance that includes interest or doesn't include interest? If we're talking about the banks, what are the fields? And those are critical fields. And so do you have an understanding, and do you have people in place who can give you that information, or are you really subject? Because as part of a lot of M&A, you also reduce staff usually. Mm-hmm. You need to know if you all of a sudden are going to let go of all of your SMEs.
Right.
So you need to know who they are, because that's also a big part of data quality is the governance piece and being able to fix the problem, being able to know where they are and how the data is defined.
So the other thing I would add to that is when you start to think about single view of customer. So you want to be able to know that as you go through an integration of the data that you've got one common view of client. There will be overlap potentially of customers, and you're going to want to consolidate the data so that you do have that single view of Mark Rowan across your systems. And then maybe that's not going to be the objective day one, but you want to be able to probably evolve to that point over a period of time. And again, the first thing you're going to have to do as it relates to ensuring that you do have a good foundation for developing that single view of client or master data in your organization is looking at duplicates, quality, redundant data, and ensuring that you've at least got a clean set to start from. And then you can begin to look at things like householding of data. Is it Mark Rowan and Mark Rowan's spouse are all living in this same location and have that common view of those data sets relative to Mark Rowan across all your systems. So if that's the end objective at the end of the day, that foundational piece of integrating those data elements in a clean and precise manner is going to be absolutely critical to all facets of it. And obviously then there's the whole privacy thing, which I'm sure we're going to get to at some point too.
Yeah.
Well,
let me, Ellie, I'm sorry, I'm going to add one more thing here because Mark just touched on master data management. And I want to say, so we've been talking a lot about not realizing the value, postponing the value, or not even, or all the risk associated with buying, but there is an upside. So if you buy a company and all of a sudden what you realize is that company has exemplary data management capabilities, that they do have well-integrated, well-thought-out, well-designed master data management system. And they do have data quality processes, and they have SMEs, and they have governance. And you happen not to have those things, or not at that level of management, you actually, or that level of maturity, you actually should pay more. This is something you're not just getting a business, and you're not only getting the data, but you're also getting capabilities that take businesses usually many years and enormous amount of money to build themselves. So you're actually not just buying a business, but you're also buying technical capability that can lift all of your businesses up, not just the one that you're buying. So that's kind of conversely, looking at it, if you see that, that's a really good, important point to maybe bring you to bring your offer up, because now the value that you can unlock from this acquisition is a lot broader than what would immediately jump out at you.
Great point.
Absolutely. So I've heard you, and Julia, I want to move back to that monetization piece as well. But I just have one more question, because I've heard you both speak about the privacy piece as well. So recently across North America, and Mark, I know you're joining us from Toronto, and Julia, you're joining us from New York, and across the board, we've seen development of numerous privacy laws. Can you speak to how this may affect some buyers and/or investors from a data perspective?
I can start on that one. So I've just had actually a lot of conversation around privacy laws in the retirement industry. I was at the conference in DC, and that was a huge topic of discussion, because obviously with the retirement plans administration in the United States, you have a lot of private data, and you also want to differentiate and monetize the data. So the question of what can you use for what purpose is really important. So and one of the challenges in the current environment that very many privacy laws. So there is a California law, and if you happen to be an international company, there is GDPR in Europe, and then there is potentially a federal law coming out in the United States, but then there are other states that are coming out with their own flavors, and you would hope they're not contradicting each other. You would hope. But it may be, we don't know yet, but it's quite possible that different states would have some of the prescriptions or regulations that make it actually difficult to comply with the laws of all the states all at the same time. So tying it back is understanding what is the state of the company that you're buying? How are they working on the privacy? Because being able to manage that really challenging environment requires really good metadata management. You need to know, again, what the data is, where it lives, where did you get it from, and what kind of permissions did you get for it. So conversation, for example, in retirement, if you got the data from the sponsor of the plan, you can only use it for that much. But if you got, let's say, phone numbers directly from a participant and they said, I'm okay with you using it for that purpose, now all of a sudden you can use it much broader, but you need to know which is which. And that's metadata management. And then again, if you're buying the company and you have no way of, if they don't have that, you have no way of knowing how can you use this data, right? If you want to monetize it, if you want to use it for analytics, but you've never gotten permission for it, and you don't, or maybe you don't know, maybe you did, maybe you did not, and all that data is kind of mixed together. So that's a big challenge. And again, that goes back into seeing before you buy, because you really do not want to buy a lawsuit.
Yeah. And so let's dive into that a little bit, because this is a fun topic for sure. My experience, the experience that I've had over the last several decades in dealing with larger North American-based companies, mostly US-based, is that privacy programs have been adopted by organizations that have typically dealt with global clients, global data sets, but they're slow to adopt privacy programs specifically within the North American market and North American data sets. That's changing. But historically, it's been a very slow adoption curve. So generally speaking, I would bet 7 times out of 10, if you're doing an acquisition, that the data is probably, and if it's outside of financial services, by the way, because the financial services world has done things a little bit differently, as is healthcare. But let's say it's a retail organization. I would say 7 times out of 10, the data has been poorly governed. And what I mean by poorly governed, access policies, use policies, consent management, and how you're applying policy to the data to be able to govern that data is probably to an extent non-existent, or it's in binders on the shelf and it's not practiced and followed, which ultimately also means that the data is probably of a poor state of quality at the same time. Let's make those assumptions. So that means without doing a full data discovery, data classification exercise and understanding of the data, there's a likelihood that you're buying a bit of a liability and not necessarily getting the asset that you anticipate that you're getting when you are acquiring that business. Now, that's just an odds game that we're playing right now, because just based on my personal experience, but I've been around the block a few times and I've seen a fair amount of things that would be somewhat surprising, especially when you get into unstructured data or documents and files that float around organizations in things like email systems and so on, because you are acquiring all those as well, not just the customer database as an example, generally. So that the liability and the risk, if you're not compliant with the new regulations that are evolving in the US, North America, and global marketplace, is significant. You want to ensure that those data assets are going to be obviously secured, anonymized where necessary, that they are following the best practices relative to the regulations that those data sets are exposed to. So in other words, if it's a citizen of California and you're acquiring a database of a few 100,000 Californian citizens, you have to manage and govern that data differently than if it's a set of citizens from Texas, as a high-level example, which really means ensuring that either those policies and so on are in place, or that you adopt those as you integrate the data into your organization, and you're starting to enforce those policies within the destiny, or the destination, I should say, sorry, the destination systems that are going to consume those data holdings. All that being said, there's a significant gap in the industry today around compliance outside of the financial services and healthcare markets. So there's a significant risk there, in my opinion.
Which sets me up for the next point here. So we've talked a lot about the risks and the costs associated with buying and investing in companies with inadequate data. But are we able to speak a little bit before we move to closing remarks here about the data capabilities and monetization value of buying a data set that's been well managed and well governed? And then in addition to how best to determine this, if you are buying a adequate data set.
I can hit the last part of that if you like at the beginning. So ultimately, because that's the business that we're in, we help
Perfect.
organizations understand the data, but understand the data from a number of perspectives: quality, the governance associated with it, the compliance associated with it, and understanding that across all data, not just the customer database, but looking at everything that you are acquiring within an organization, evaluating the risk and evaluating the value on the other side of it. So are you getting the value that you perceive you're getting? And hopefully the answer to that question is absolutely yes. And then driving the remediation strategies and the remediation actions that might be necessary to make the data fit for purpose once you consume it in your downstream systems within the acquiring organization. So that's ultimately what we do with our core tech.
And so, and it's actually really good combination. What I do in my consulting advisory practice is to look at, assess the data capabilities during M&A, and together with look at the data is also the data capabilities from human to technology and to the organizational governance ones. So, and just to be clear, this is the work that will, if you buy the company, this is the work you will have to do anyway. Because to successfully integrate, you need to know all of those things. So there is no successful integration without doing all the things that Mark has described. There is also no successful integration without understanding data stewardship practices, master data management practices, and so on. But the point we're making here that it needs to be moved before the buy, but then you get a lot more value out of it. So you're doing it anyway, you're going to invest in it anyway. You do it up front, there is significantly more value and potentially much quicker path to realization of the value from that investment or from that new company that you bought, and to get that inorganic growth objective that you had when you started looking for it. So, and opportunities again to leverage are multiple, because data, like just CRM, and I go back to CRM because that's one of those easy examples. The data about customers is really gold. It's a customer experience, it's opportunities for cross-sell, it's a lot of analytics that you can drive from that, but you need to know a lot of things about it. You need to know privacy consideration, security consideration, and just basic data management. Is it accessible? Is it of high quality? Do you know what it is? Do you know where to find it? So all of that drives to the, again, value in M&A.
And then the last point, all of that information will also tell you how long and how expensive it will be to remediate and integrate that data into your organization. And again, to your point, more rapidly get to value.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Great. That was a good summary.
So, I think based on what you're saying, I have a really good sense of what the response is going to be here. And I heard you mention, it's important to do this beforehand because you're going to have to do it either way. So it's better to know the risks up front and the value. So do either of you have any closing thoughts on ways that organizations can ensure that they're setting themselves up and their companies up for success as it relates to mergers and acquisitions?
So one of the things that I've noticed, and it's probably fairly recent, that during M&A due diligence, CISA, information security, gets assessed immediately. Like it's part of the assessment. There is never a merger and acquisition that I know of that would not have information security up there and present. So my closing thought that data assessment should be right there on par, not only when you're talking about or looking at the potential of synergies of saving money after the acquisition, but in the same way, assess the risk, assess the upside, and estimate where the price should be, and also estimate the cost of the transition, time to value. So that's kind of my closing thought on this.
That's awesome. And so I think I would echo everything that you just said. So the idea is clearly spend a little bit up front to gain a lot downstream and gain it much more rapidly than you might be able to do otherwise. So good summary. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I've certainly learned a lot today. I hope those viewing this webinar feel the same. And thank you both, Julia and Mark, for being here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.